Eddie, welcome. Welcome to this channel and to my world. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thank you for having me. It's an honor to be with you and your community.
I have so many notes and I've listened to a few of your interviews. We already had a pre-talk a couple days ago. I'm so excited to talk to you. I obviously want to hear about zeolite, how you found it, your story. I'll probably add some of my story in as well. Um, but the one thing that really caught my eye when I was doing my research was that this mineral, which I will get you to talk about a bit more, it's been around for a long time, obviously. And I'm just going to read something that I felt was really interesting. I was alive in 1986. I know you were.
Yes.
And yeah, and there was a pretty big nuclear disaster that occurred in 1986 in Chernobyl at the there. I remember it. I was quite young, but I still remember it. And I'm going to read something that I found on the internet, and I'll post all these links so people can check these. But it says here, and I might get it wrong, so correct my English here, clinoptilite, zeolite.
Clenoptolite, that's
Did I say
very
that right?
close. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just say zeolite has a variety of roles in tackling the dramatic detrimental effects of the Chernobyl accident. Over 500,000 tons, which is a lot, of zeolite was shipped in from the Ukraine, Georgia, and Russia, and the material was successfully used to decontaminate low-level radiation waters. So they've been using this for quite a while to clean up environmental disasters. I looked and saw Fukushima, which was more recent.
Yep.
They used that as well. And so I wanted to start with that, which is kind of an odd way to start because it's around and people are using it. It looks like they use it in agriculture, farms. Just talk a little bit about that before we get into the human role, because it's something that is known, and I think we're just starting to learn about it for human consumption. So I'll let you take it away from there.
Sure. And those are two good examples in a modern world. And yes, I was around in 86. I'm 57 years old, so I don't go back
Yeah.
to the origins of zeolite, but I've got some history with it. It has a unique structure, and I know we're going to get into that, and it has, because of that structure, a native negative charge. And so one of the things that means is when we encounter things in nature and or man-made that are positively charged and or have the right size structure, the zeolite binds with it and it will stay bound. And so if you're trying to clean up something like radioactive pollution from a variety of different sources, if you can find something to bind with it to help you better manage it and sort of hold on to it, right? That's what you're looking for. And that's why it becomes optimal in situations like Chernobyl or Fukushima, where when combined with concrete, which is largely how that was administered, it essentially they were able to build almost a dome over some of those sites that were the most degraded in terms of the construction and the facilities, right? And so it kind of trapped it. And that's exactly, in a way, how it works inside the human body, right? It traps toxins. So it's quite attractive. And, the history actually goes back further than that. Now, they didn't always know where it was coming from, but you can look back to zeolites to clay-eating societies in China. So back in the day, right, when someone in your community had dysentery, it was essentially a death sentence because you were going to dehydrate and not be able to take in nutrients and eventually die. And they did recognize it was contagious. It was a virus, right? They just didn't know what was happening there. And so people would be cascaded out to, say, a riverside or a lake area, and starving to death, they would eat dirt. Well, it turns out some of that dirt was clay and had zeolites in it, and these folks miraculously got better. And so what, in hindsight, you realize, because they didn't know then what to call it, the name actually comes from a Greek scientist, obviously many, many, many decades later, was that it even got in the way of some level of viral replication. Now, I don't want that to be confused with what's going on in the world today, but it did have that application. And the Romans used zeolite in clay to create their sewage systems for their city centers, which in Roman times, right, there weren't city centers because of germs and other issues with waste that caused plague and other problems. So it's really quite remarkable and has been a part of man's life in some form or fashion for hundreds of years.
It's incredible that mineral is just there, and we've been using it in little ways, either intuitively or now specifically for our needs. And thank you for that history lesson. That's great. I have a strong affinity to Roman and Greek history, so I can just imagine the aquifers and the clay in there filtering the water and all of that.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And I'm going to shift gears to the idea of toxins, because that my audience knows me talking about toxins, but from a toxic stress perspective. So some people here might be new to me, so thank you for clicking on this video. For those totally new to me, some of you might be new through your world. But I work with folks who have stored trauma in the body at the nervous system, autonomic nervous system level. And what we know is that when we store survival stress, I call it trapped toxic trauma,
Sure.
because some stress is fine, right? And if you get a cut on your arm, you could consider that a trauma, or a broken bone is a trauma. But when we keep emotions in, old traumas in, we end up getting what we would call post-traumatic stress. I'm really simplifying this. And it can impact not just our mental state and emotional state, but our entire physiology that is governed by the autonomic nervous system.
Sure.
And so I see toxins as that, but I'm now starting to really look at toxins that we have in the environment that we are taking into our body. And while I would love to believe our body can get rid of all this stuff, a lot of this stuff is man-made. It's not nature-made. And so us as nature, the system doesn't know how to excrete it. Would you agree with that statement that I just made about that and toxins that are man-made getting into the body?
Yeah, absolutely. And frankly, if you look at the chemistry, both the physical chemistry involved with sort of the structure of some of these chemicals and toxins, right? And I'm talking about the 80 to say 100,000 man-made toxins that are a part of our lives through consumer products, right? Which is very sweeping in its scope, right? You could be talking about herbicides, fungicides, pesticides used to grow conventional crops. You could be talking about materials used to make your pants resist stains or water, or to make the interior of an airplane flame retardant, right? Or the carpet in your home easier to clean, or the dry cleaning material used to dry clean your clothes, or preservatives or packaging material used for products, or even things used to make your smartphone or clean your smartphone, or just, I mean, these applications are so broad it's almost overwhelming. In simple terms, our bodies just were not designed to manage these toxins, really, even at very minor levels. And so we wind up in this modern world, which is unique, right? This wasn't necessarily 100 years ago. Toxins would have a different type of definition, right? We could sort of understand the burning of coal or wood or other things that would emit toxins. And your bodies were clearly, during those times, that's also suffering, right? If you're in a burning forest in the 1800s or a burning forest in the 2000s, it's still a problem. It's just that now it isn't just a burning forest, it's all the man-made materials burning up in homes, and just it's, so there's a burden, right, that the body faces. And so when you describe stress in that way, there's also a physiological and a very direct stress that comes to the cells in the body, stress to your DNA, stress to your immune system, stress to your central nervous system from physical toxins. And it's making us sick. It's making us more vulnerable to all kinds of diseases. And so while the toxin itself may not be the direct cause of your illness, it's playing a role, particularly as you've got a body burden, and some people's bodies manage it better than others, in just managing those stressors. And so you could argue that it accelerates aging. It raises risk of degenerative diseases such as cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, all types of lifestyle issues. I mean, for goodness sakes, let's think about something like lead, which we know quite a bit about and how it can erode a person's IQ, well, people don't necessarily also then directly link it to how it affects mood and attitude. A lot of your serotonin's being produced in your gut. And if you've got toxins in your body, you don't have a healthy biome. That little pharmacy that makes that serotonin that allows you to deal with life and affect your moods not functioning like it used to. We can even go back and look at people with exposures to lead, which particularly in like the 1960s and 70s when it came from largely gasoline, right? Because we were burning lead-based gasoline and not just from the water supply, could even affect criminal behavior because it can erode executive function or the ability to judge right and wrong. So this is huge how it extends into all aspects of our lives.
I agree. And I want to get into your story in a second. So hang tight. I want to read something if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because I know my audience, they love neuroplasticity. And I work at that neuroplastic level with the somatic system, movement, what we would call stored procedural memories, which is what causes PTSD, all these things. And this is from a book, I quote this all the time, Dr. Norman Doidge. He is a physician, a researcher, really got the term neuroplasticity into the world, and I'll obviously link this. But he has 5 stages of neuroplastic healing. And 2, 3, 4, and 5 are the work I do. But his first stage is specific to environmental factors. And I think you'll like this passage, so this is why I wanted to read it. So his first stage is he calls correction of the general cellular functions of the neurons and glia. And he says this is the only stage that doesn't directly address wiring issues, that very specialized ability of the neurons to connect and communicate with each other, but instead focuses on the general health of the neurons and the cell functions they have in common with other cells. In many brain problems, and you just talked about this, the brain becomes miswired because the neurons and the glia have been disturbed by an external source, such as an infection, a heavy metal toxin, a pesticide, a drug, or food sensitivity. Or they have been undersupplied with resources and certain minerals. This would be our good, healthy food, right? These general problems are best corrected before beginning the stages following so that the patient can get better. Now, I've seen people get better by doing the wiring at the somatic level first, and then they go to the toxins. To me, there's no linear way. It's you do what you can, when you can, and at the end of the day, try to cover all the stages. He says here, the general cellular repair stage is especially relevant in treating autism and learning disorders and in lowering dementia, for example, and it also is important for psychiatric disorders, bipolar, attention deficit, and then he goes on to just say how important getting rid of these external chemicals, toxins are to healthy brain function. I wanted to stage that because I'm going to ask you some specifics in a second, but tell me how you found zeolite. Tell me how this path started for you. Take it away.
Well, and thank you for sharing that, because I like people that are doing the kind of work to make sure people recognize the broad nature of this discussion. When we talk about healing and all the ways we can talk about it, taking the large view, the holistic view, right, pretty critical in self-management and even how we're trying to make decisions on caregivers. We're going to for advice and trying to learn. And so I appreciate that. You don't always get that broad approach. For me, this begins, there's sort of 2 phases to this. One is in my 20s, having been reasonably in good shape when I was at the university, where you've got a little extra time to pay attention to, being active and athletic and these kinds of things. In my mid-20s, I found myself in not so good shape, right? I had gotten into my work and my career, sort of not kept the investment of time and movement and exercise, and also just the on-the-go sort of lifestyle, in a busy career where you're not eating right? So the definition of fast food, right? You're just trying to get something to satisfy this immediate hunger. And so I had an appointment for a physical for an insurance policy, and I came back as a high risk. And I'm like, I'm not a smoker. I don't know what's going on here, but I had elevated triglycerides and cholesterols. Even my blood sugars were high, all lifestyle related. Right now, it's kind of on this path to become one of those general statistics of somebody that somewhere in their 30s are going to be offered high blood pressure medication, cholesterol reducing drug, diabetic medic, just sort of going down that path by not taking ownership, right? And so my eyes were open to what's going on. And so I had an introduction to the nutrition industry, and I was intrigued by it. But what really solidified it for me and made it personal, even beyond my own self, was my mom. My mom, Judy, I'll jump to the end and tell you she's alive and well today and all those good things. But she's not, she was pregnant with me when she was 17. So she's not that much older than me. And so, she and I were pretty close, growing up. And toward the ends of the 1980s, she became sick in a way that we could not find a solution for. She began to lose some weight. She was super vulnerable to any kind of cough, cold, illness, almost listless, kind of like I described sometimes she was kind of wasting away on us. And at first it was no big deal. We went to the local physicians, and then, eventually though we realized there's no answers coming here. They would try all kinds of medications and things. No solutions were being found. And then eventually we went to university hospitals. I live in North Carolina, wonderful university hospital system. And so we're getting into a couple of years of this, and she's not getting better. In fact, she's getting worse. She's tired and lethargic to the point of really not being able to work like she should. And so eventually someone said, hey, we've got a name of a doctor, but he's got a reputation as being a quack. We were so desperate. We're like, give us the number. We'll figure that part out ourselves. And it turns out he was just a person that focused on environmental toxins and using IV chelation therapy to try to help a person get back to a state where they could be better examined, better understood to figure out what was going on. And in hindsight, he had her on a pretty darn aggressive chelation therapy, maybe a little dangerous, but at the time we didn't know that. Well, within a couple of weeks, she really responded. Now, she was on a chelation therapy for 6-8 hours a day, very expensive, 5-6 days a week, but she responded. And ultimately what we discovered was she had had breast implants when she was younger, and she was having an autoimmune response to those implants, and one was believed to be leaking. And so between that therapy and getting those implants removed, she got better. And now, knowing what I know today, she had all the signs of toxicity, but I don't even think the physicians we saw, I want to think of them as being earnest in their thought process, but they just weren't even thinking that type of thing was possible. So we wound up essentially with a person specializing, even sort of castigated outside of the mainstream medical community because of those thought processes. And so that really did two things for me. I already understood that you're essentially no better than your diet in terms of health. And then lifestyle and movement plays a role. But I had never really understood the role of toxins. And so today, as I've evolved my thinking, and as a company, we think about the role of toxins, getting good stuff back in, so take bad stuff out, put good stuff back in, and then the role of finding balance through things like CBD or exercise or meditation, whatever it happens to be, but realizing you've got to look at these things in a holistic picture if what you want to enjoy is long-term health, essentially trying to maximize your health to its best potential. We're not all the same, but there's no reason we can't give ourselves a fighting chance with our habits and the things we're paying attention to. And so it really, those events, for me, they were earth-shaking. Now I'll tell you this much. It didn't happen for me overnight. Yeah. This is a career for 30 some years. So it took me a long time to really, I did a lot of trying things out, checking things out, reading books, going to seminars, working in different environments to really hone my own beliefs about this. So it took some time. I say that for a reason. I don't want anybody to think that a light bulb's got to switch on immediately for you for this to be effective, right? We're all on a journey of our own. The more curious you are about your own health and your own information sources, the better off you'll be. But it may take some time, but I think you can get there realizing if you're not paying attention to environmental toxins, you're leaving a part of the equation out for good health.
Oh, yes. I used to have the mindset, and perhaps it was my ignorance, maybe it was just my youth. If I'm eating fairly well, why do I have to worry about detoxifying my body? What gives, right? However, it wasn't until about 10 years ago, 8 years ago-ish, when I came down with the most horrendous skin condition. And I say that with quotes because it was just thought to be what they called contact dermatitis. I have the pictures on my website. It looked like third degree burns. It looked like I had nuclear waste coming out of my pores. Um, and I know that diet did nothing. Changing my diet did nothing. I tried acupuncture, and I love all these things, right? But for me specifically, it was very clear this is not just a skin allergy to something I'm eating in my diet. It's not from weed or whatever, or sugar. And it wasn't until a couple of years later when it finally healed, and I didn't even think about toxins. I wish I had known this 10 years ago, so much so. Um, I was sitting in a training and we started talking about something called chemical trauma. And when you are exposed, as I was, to chemicals, my parents are both veterinarians. My mother was carrying me when she was working in an animal hospital. I was in the animal hospital as an infant. I worked at the animal hospital. And this is nothing against mom and dad. It was just the family business, right?
Right.
But I was up in it, inhaling fumes. It was my after school job for years. But the one interesting thing too is that my mother grew up in the Philippines, and she was a student at the University of Manila back in the, sorry mom if I get this wrong, but like the 60s-ish, early 60s. And she remembers them spraying the dorm rooms with DDT. I think it was once a week. And the loudspeakers would come up, come on girls, shut your windows, and they would spray, because malaria and all these things were are a problem in these more wet, humid, hot geographies. But it was just not known. And same with my dad. He was on a dairy farm growing up, so he just remembers being covered in this stuff when he was growing up on the farm. So even this stuff can transfer, we could say, intergenerationally. I'm that little egg inside of her getting exposed to this. So again, it just made so much more sense when I'm like, oh, we can get traumatized by chemicals, and it's in our cells, it's in the fluid of our body. It's not just in one muscle or one bone, it is in our fluids, and our fluids are everywhere. And so with that, I want to ask you about your product, zeolite, but why it's different than, say, the 500,000 tons of zeolite mineral that they dumped into Chernobyl. Because this isn't something that's, we're not grading a mineral into our food and sprinkling it. It's a very different product that you've created that has to do with the fluids.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for sharing that. And a lot of people don't think about it, but DDT was banned in the 1970s in the U.S. If we still check the cord blood of babies today, the majority will show DDT because it does pass from one generation to the next. DDT is not quite in the category of a forever chemical, but it's close. We tend to think of PFASs, things like C8 found in Teflon as being those forever chemicals. They're just not, they're not going away, right? They survive, and they can wreak havoc. It's fortunate that more birth defects didn't show up for mothers with those exposures.
It's a real issue, and before you get into that, you did recommend two movies that I took in this weekend just to educate myself on what C8 is. It's a long story, but I'll put those in the show notes so that people can check out the dangers of these chemicals that are in our everyday plastics, frying pans, all these things. Teflon is the main one that this documentary and movie covered. It was mind-blowing, Eddie, watching that. That's
Yeah.
all I'll say.
Yeah, Dark Waters is one of them, and when you look at how long it was known and how hard the corporations fought to keep that news and the accusations out of the public's eye for two reasons. One, financial loss from litigation, but two, they want to keep using it. And so it's just amazing to me, but it's it's something that happened, right? And so people can look at those details. But
Yeah.
here's
Yeah.
there are 50 some natural zeolites. So we use
Yes.
clinoptilolite, which you so eloquently said before, which is a sheet-like zeolite, and common because it's been used with humans in a variety of applications, lots of times in food production. It acts as an agent to create powders to keep them from clumping. But in terms of its preparation to be used as a supplement, that really won't do it, right? You've got to do some special things to it. So we mine our zeolite here in the United States in a very pristine environment. Out of the ground, it's Prop 65 compliant, which means it's a clean product out of the ground, which is where we start, which is a good thing. But then we have a proprietary process to prep it so that in the body, essentially, it's more bioavailable for two reasons. One, because we size it a certain way. So our Pure Body Extra Strength product, which is really the one I think the bulk of what we're talking about today, is nano-sized. So as you talked about these toxins that are often angstrom in size, cadmium, lead, mercury, things like that, they make their ways into the cellular system. They are in your cells, right? You got 100 million cells based upon most what the research suggests out there, give or take. And so you wind up with these things in your cell, and in part, the body will use the cell as a place to trap the toxins because they just don't know what else to do with them, right? It's not something we natively process. And so they get trapped in there. So the zeolite becomes this very useful tool because we can nano-size it, but importantly, prep the cage so that it's more interested in things like cadmium, lead, mercury, these positively charged toxins, because essentially what happens is it works like a magnet, just as I described earlier where it binds with the radioactive material. When a zeolite, which has a negative charge, comes in proximity to, say, cadmium or lead, which have positive charges, they will bind much like the north end and the south end of a magnet. And because we don't have any receptor sites, zeolites are not essential minerals, so your body will not save them, right? They're not going to, the body doesn't try to use it for anything, and it will process out of your body in about a 4 to 6 hour period of time based upon sort of renal function and bowel function. So in terms of a useful tool, which is what it is, to aid your body's own natural abilities to detox, it's brilliant. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. So we mine this natural zeolite that's clean to start with. We prep the cage by flooding it during this treatment process we have with calcium and magnesium in minute amounts, but they serve as sort of a placeholder because it works based upon ion exchange. So it will trap inside its cage as well as trap some things on the outer surface, because just like you think of a magnet, you put a magnet in your hand and put a piece of paper on it, it will still be magnetic above the piece of paper, right? And so the cage itself will also gather toxins just like the cage will. And so it becomes just marvelous in its function. We then trap it inside a water molecule. So it literally, when you see the bottle, if you look at it, you can't see it. It's smaller than what your eye could ever see.
It's
if you want to
clear.
see it, we've got a highly magnified photograph from a university of it on our website so people can see what it looks like. But it's brilliant because it's odorless and tasteless. It's made in a spray. Spray it in your mouth, couple, 3 sprays, 3 times a day, and it gives you the ability to systemically detox. And in this case, it's just really working in complement to how your own body's native systems work. And so unlike, say, bentonite clay or charcoal or herbals or coffee enemas or all these varieties of things that can act as cleanses, and they can be effective in the digestive tract, here you're talking about a reach that, at least to my knowledge, is unmatched with any other kind of detox aid I've seen, witnessed to, read about, whatever happens to be. We think it's just, and I'm careful with hyperbole, but it's just about like a little miracle mineral to me in its function and the broad reach of its applications. So that's, hopefully that answers that fundamental question, but it's just so eloquent how it works in the body.
Thank you for that explanation. So I'm going to do a quick review to make sure I get it. In many ways, so nano means really small. So you're basically taking this mineral, I looked online, it looks beautiful, into the tiniest tiniest little thing of a particle, and you are embedding it in water. It's almost like you've blown it apart so that it is so tiny. Kind of like if you were to people that have gallstones and kidney stones, and they use that, I forget what it is, but something to blow those rock hard things that shouldn't be in your kidneys out, and you pee them out. It's almost like you're putting this mineral into a water cage, essentially, and because it's water based, it gets into all the cells. The analogy I felt into, it's like these little mini vacuum cleaners are being dispersed into the entire body. They're going to wherever fluid is, which is everywhere, and it's just chomping up and sucking up all the bad stuff that shouldn't be there. I was introduced to this product through a friend, Savannah, who's a lovely, lovely woman and human. And the reason I found out about it is I just commented to her one day. I said, "You are one of the most radiant human beings I have ever met." And I'm not saying that to like keep you as my friend, and it's inside and out, but she just glows. And she's like, "Yeah, well, I wasn't always like this." And she showed me some before and after photos of her, and I was like, "Holy cow, you really look different. Even though you were still beautiful 7 years ago, your face looks completely different." So I started to try this around this time last year. It was September, so a year to when this video goes out. Not really expecting anything other than belief because of a good friend who I trust. And I started to notice these marked differences with even my appetite, clarity in my eyes. It was almost hard to put a word to it. But the interesting thing, Eddie, is I had followers who have been following me for many years say to me, "You look younger than you did 3 years ago in your videos." Even though I do have gray hair now and I didn't 3 years ago. And so I said, well, it's funny you should pick up on that because I'm still doing everything that I was doing 3 years ago, but there's a few things that I have changed. I'm gone completely organic in my food. I've started to use the zeolite, both products that you have, been detoxing more with sweating and sauna. So it's a multi-dimensional approach, but some of my staff have been taking this product and their kids have. And even one of my main assistants, she noticed that her son's eyes used to have these dark circles under them. And he has tons of sleep. But Savannah even, she had these dark circles. And I looked at a photo of myself that someone brought to my attention that was probably from 5 years ago, Eddie. And while I don't have the gray hair, I was like, oh my God, I had those too, and I didn't even notice it. And my forehead looked more inflamed. So these are just some of my testimony to this product mineral. It's really a mineral that is naturally based. Tell me what's happening with this dark circle thing, because I've seen a few people. My sense it has to do with the kidneys, and maybe the kidneys aren't working as hard because they're getting help. But what do you know about that shift in appearance with the face, with the use of the Pure Body Extra?
Well, there's a few things here, and let's unpack a couple of things. One, this happens sometimes where people that are making a lot of right decisions in terms of lifestyle will all of a sudden use this, and they're surprised because they have been doing so many things right. But if you're a regular greens user, or if you're using a greens drink, right, which is notoriously helpful in aiding the body's natural abilities to detox, or even things like saunas, which will help you with sweat, it's still not necessarily addressing the totality of the problem, which is at the cellular level, right? So when we mill it and get it to those sizes, and so essentially what we do, getting it inside that water cluster, is now it'll travel through aquaprinas, which are the sort of the channels of the way fluids transfer in the cell, right? So for people that want to geek out on some biochemistry, right, this is how these things work. And because it has a physical property, so the zeolite is hardened, and it will not, it doesn't dissolve in your body. It's not like a drug that has a dissolution, right, because it dissolves in the body. In this case, it remains a hardened substance, even though you can't see it. It's that small, but that physical presence means those toxins, which are also hardened and don't dissolve. They may become angstrom in size, which is even smaller than nano, but that lead or that cadmium or that mercury or those other toxins we don't want in our body, they stay there and they're disruptive to how your DNA functions, how you process things, even at the cellular level. And so getting it that small so it can get in there and mix it up with these toxins, right? That's where that binding needs to occur. And so what then happens is by helping the body eliminate those toxins, you relieve the body of a level of work it was doing. So you can think of it this way. If you've got an automobile that you've had for some time and you've never engaged in maintenance, you've never paid attention to a tune-up or changing out the filters or whatever it happens to be, eventually the car runs poorly. Its physical properties are the same as the day you took it off the lot, but it just doesn't work as well because it's been burdened by just the trash of a car's life, right? Whatever that turns out to be. You go and get the filters changed, change the oil, tune it up. All of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, this is, I don't need a new car. This is like a brand new.
You feel the difference. Yeah.
You feel the difference, right? This is a very similar dynamic to the function of the body. And you're going to have a very, very similar response. And as we've talked about toxins, the one thing I tell people is it doesn't matter if you were engaged in that healthy lifestyle. That's a positive thing. But the truth is that even in a healthy lifestyle, you're still exposed to toxins on a daily basis. You may eliminate some of them, which is great, but if you don't do something to really support how your body manages toxins, they do catch up. There's no question, and they make you more vulnerable to disease because they disrupt the function of the immune system, the central nervous system, and so you just become, in some ways, defenseless.
I wanted to just touch on one more thing around benefits. And one person, I read some of your reviews, and for those of you watching, there are tons of reviews and what we can consider testimonials, articles on your site. I started to go through them. I'm like, we'll just have to tell people to go to the site and read for themselves the wonderful articles you have, because I'm like, well, I could ask them this and this, and so I'm going to link some of the things I've seen that I'll encourage my audience to go look and research and read. There was a wonderful article, I don't think I have it anymore here. It was quite long on all the benefits of zeolite. It was called the white paper, so I encourage people to check that out. But here's what one person said. Her name was Rebecca, and she said, honestly, when I first tried the products, the zeolite, I didn't expect results. I hear that a lot with my work too. Most companies blow proverbial smoke, if you know what I mean. But boy, was I ever pleasantly surprised, all caps, when my brain fog disappeared. I have so much more energy and people were asking me what I was taking. I'm a lifer now. So there's two parts to that. Do you know what's happening at that level with brain fog? And we sort of touched on the extra energy. But the second question, Eddie, is this something that you believe people should continue to take indefinitely? And I'm still using the product fairly regularly. I know Savannah, our mutual friend, she still uses it, probably not to the degree she did 5 or so years ago. What do you say to the brain fog and sort of the longevity of how long someone would use this?
Well, I'll answer the last question first. I've used zeolite as much as I could daily since 2005. Even my first access to it, which was an inferior source, I just believe in it because I can't get rid of. You're too young to know about a funny after-school movie in the 1970s that starred John Travolta called The Boy in the Bubble. He had an immune problem. And he lived in a bubble, and he wanted to be socializing. We don't live in a bubble. None of us do, and toxins are invisible. So they're just there, right? I've got 1 million miles on 2 separate airlines. I've been exposed to a lot of toxins, and I continue to fly and live life, and so I can't avoid them. And even if I tried to become a hermit and live in my bubble, it's just not realistic. So I'm a daily user. And I believe it's just as an important strategy as I have of getting good micronutrients in my body, as well as managing stress and exercise. I think all these things are interrelated, and I don't weigh one out more than the other. If you look at one of the things that happens with toxins is perhaps one of the pieces that's so insidious is they can disrupt how the mitochondria functions and the production of ATP. And so if you've got somebody that's lethargic but maybe not tied to the
And
volume of
just
sleep
quickly
they're
for
getting.
those, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there, Eddie. Just for those that don't know what ATP is, that's the energy that we need in our body to live, basically. So the
Yeah, it's
mitochondria produce energy. They're
yeah, that's right.
important cells.
Yeah, that's right. It's sort of the
Yeah.
everything you eat and do is so that the mitochondria can work to produce that ATP, and that's what gives you the spark, right? That's where it comes from. And anything that's disruptive to that is going to impact the physical manifestation of yourself, right? It's at a very chemically biochemistry level. This is where you go. This is how this works. And so anything that's disruptive to that process is going to affect your energy level, and your brain needs energy. I mean, outside of digestion post meal, there's probably nothing we do unless you're a professional athlete that needs more energy to function than your brain, right? The body is so brilliant, it keeps about 400 to 600 calories just sort of waiting in your liver to be called on by your brain at any given moment so that your brain can keep going no matter what the dearth of accessible calories are, right? So it's really critical. So when you talk about low energy or brain fog, very often it's disruption at that level, or even just like someone with exposure to lead or other toxins that literally affects how their brain functions, right? And can lower IQ. And so brain fog, while probably not an official medical term, it's one of the things we hear. So here's what we hear. I've got more energy. I'm sleeping better. My brain fog issue has dissipated, right? Memory, even people talking to us about my immune function is better. I'm not getting as many coughs, colds, and flus. And of course, this is all we believe because when you help the body better manage toxins, it just functions better. The zeolite isn't causing the end result. It's just preparing the body so its function is better. And so that's where we see these things come from.
Beautiful. Yeah, I have noticed that this last 18 months has been the longest I've gone without getting sick. So it's interesting. Usually, and I haven't been traveling, so I'm gonna, my science friend says things have been a little different the last sort of 12 or
Sure.
so months, but I haven't gotten sick. And I remember when I was younger, whenever I would start to lose a little bit of weight due to more activity, being better with my eating, I would get a cold. And I just pieced this together this past weekend. When you lose weight, so fat, adipose tissue, you are shedding the toxins that are stored in your fat cells. And I've learned recently that our fat cells store toxins. And what I believe was occurring in my 20s was that I was getting slimmer, but I was also releasing toxins. And then that causes the immune system to go, what is going on? And then if there's a viral load in the system, you succumb to that sickness. And it just hasn't happened. And so that to me is really interesting too, how these little light bulbs are going off in my brain around just the totality of what it takes to be healthy and how important this detox is.
It's important, right? It's one of those pillars along with all these other decisions we're
Yeah,
talking about, but it's critical.
it's so important. So tell me about the exact offer that Touchstone, your company, and you are offering my people. It's happening for a solid week from a Monday to Sunday. Give me your 2 cents on what it is, how it works, kind of the more nitty gritty of this offer.
Absolutely. And hey, we were glad to do this, right? We were glad we had a chance to connect and we looked at your community
Yeah.
and it kind of looks like our community, and so we're quite happy to do this. So the Pure Body Extra Strength, which is the primary product that we're talking about, it's our global leader. We ship it out to some 60 countries, and its retail price is $79.95, and we sell it for that price all day. But I realize for a lot of people, to try something, that can be expensive and they're just uncertain, right? If they knew it was good, right, then it's no problem. And so what we've done is sort of taken away that barrier. And so we're actually going to make an offer to your audience of $5 for the first month. And so they literally can buy a product for $5 for the first month. So if they click the link, here's what they're going to see. It's offered at the regular price, which has no additional interactions, and it's offered for $5 if you agree to be on subscription. We do that because the next price that's best is on subscription, and it's $63.83 US dollars. So if you take the $5 offer, you're agreeing to subscription. But to say to anybody in the audience, if you do that and you decide 10 minutes later you don't want the subscription, you can chat with us online, you can email us, you can call, whatever means you'd like to, as easily as possible with no questions about why, and say, I'd like to turn off my subscription. Even if you're just going to get the $5 offer and you know you're going to do that, that's okay. We recognize that the majority of people that try this product will continue. They'll come back to it because it does such a great job. And even at the $5 price, it comes with an unconditional money back guarantee, empty bottle, a 30-day guarantee. So we've got a lot of confidence in the fact people are going to enjoy the product and they want to continue to use it. And so we've just tried to eliminate that initial barrier. And it is an expense for us, but that's okay, because on the long-term view of things, we believe we'll build a customer relationship that's important for both the customer and ourselves. And so we're happy to do this, not with all audiences, but with the right community, which yours is the right community. We're happy to do this.
Totally. And I waited a year to have this conversation with you because I wanted to see the impact on my system. My husband has been using it, some of my team, some of my friends. And true story, the same person I mentioned whose kids are on it, both daughter and son. Actually, her daughter started to get more regular in her bowel movements. I'm allowed to say that, I have permission. But she had tried your product at the beginning and then was sort of captivated by another product in the United States. We're in Canada. And her experience with the shipping was terrible with the other company. I don't know what company it is. And so she went back to using Touchstone. And I will say the quickness of you getting the product to Canada is stupendous, because I order a lot of things from the United States, and sometimes it takes forever, and you have to call a broker and give them your number and this and that, and it just shows up on your door quite quickly. And the packaging is all environmentally friendly. I will add that to people's, who want to know that you are considering the environment. It's in paper, there's no styrofoam, there's no plastic, everything is recyclable. And I know that is something that is important to you and everyone that you work with. So thank you for making that also part of your ethos.
Yeah, it is important to us. I mean, you can even compost it, right? So that's pretty critical. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe it ships to Canada for free. So that's also a good thing.
It does. It does. It is a good thing. Well, Eddie, I could talk to you for hours, but I know you've got another thing going on and I need to respect your time. Is there any final wish? I always ask this of my guests. What is a wish that you have for all humans watching this, listening to this, whether or not they decide to take you up and us up on this offer? What's your wish for everyone watching?
I do have a wish, and I also want to thank you for your time and the chance to be with you. And I hope it's not the last time. I hope we have a chance to visit again. We live in a world where in order to survive, we're all skeptical. And sometimes skepticism becomes jaded, and we just think everything is just marketing. Marketing is a real thing. We're a for-profit company, so there's no question that we try to refine ourselves and the things that we do. But sometimes you just need to take a leap of faith and try something, because here you just have nothing to lose. And even if it's to not buy this product, even at the leap of faith, it's just to think more about the invisible killers that are toxins, and just educate yourself and look around your house at what you're doing and what could you do to improve the quality of the water that you drink, the air that you breathe, and other decisions that you're making that, while it's not obvious, it's just like decisions to constantly eat ultra processed foods. Eventually you pay a price. And so if we can bring some awareness and wake some people up to the fact that toxins are an important thing to consider, just like the quality of your diet and other things, then we'll have served part of our purpose in this world.
Beautiful. I
Thank
think
you.
that's a great place to end. Thank you. Thank you, and you're welcome. We'll meet again.
Sounds good. Have a great day, Irene.